Hi everyone, I am recording a screencast video lecture for Module 8. I'm using a headset for the first time, so I hope that the sound quality is either better or the same as my previous recordings. So anyways, I'm doing that to try to cancel out any ambient noise behind me and around me. So, because I do record these at my home. So, I want to talk a little bit about some of your assignments for this week and some of your readings. So, the first thing is that you're going to be continuing to work in your groups for the remainder of this course. So if you've, as you can see from Module 8 here, you're doing another team meeting, so you're continuing to talk to your team within those group kind of discussion rooms. There's 4 groups in the class, and you each have your own personal discussion space, and only I'm able to see all of the spaces. So I do kind of look through those to make sure everybody's doing okay. And then, if I think I went in and everybody looked like they were doing well. So I just kind of made a note. Hey, you guys are doing good, good ideas, that kind of thing. So I'll continue to do that through Module 8 and through Module 9, because in Module 9 you have another team meeting. And so what you're working on for the remainder of this course is this grant proposal project. So in Module 7, you were going through the process of looking at CFPs, or call for papers, and you were going through, you had to, select 3 of them, and then within your group decide on, okay, which one do we really want to further explore and actually develop into a full-blown grant proposal. So that was kind of what you were doing in Module 7, is looking at what your options are in terms of the CFPs for grants, and kind of making a decision about which one you want to focus on. So, and everybody chose some really interesting ones. You guys did a great job on finding some really great grant proposals for that. So I look forward to reading through those more as I'm grading for Module 7 this week. So anyways, the first thing is this reading. There's no textbook reading this week, although you are asked in some of the assignments to reflect back a little bit, because it's asking you again about kind of ethics and audience awareness, and those are things that you have read about in some of the textbook readings so far. So it's asking you to draw from that bank of knowledge from those previous chapters from the course. So the readings for this week, and I did something that I hope will be helpful, but you can oops, sorry, that was the reflection assignment. My apologies. And if I can go to the proper link, this is the reading here. You have these 2 readings. One's by the NSF, the National Science Foundation, which is a very long document that is very technical in nature, and it looks really scary, honestly, when you look through it, because it's so wordy, and there's so many things like definitions, and that's because the NSF is trying to cover a lot of ground, because who can apply for grants with the NSF is such a large group of people, and a large number of different types of industries can apply for grants in the NSF. So they're really covering mass ground. If I were revising their this document, the Proposals and Award Policies and Procedures Guide, I would probably format it better. It's not very readable, but so the formatting for it, I think, is it makes it a little bit daunting to read. I don't necessarily think it's organized in the best way, especially when you're dealing with so much information. So don't let that scare you or cause you any distress. What I did was you're supposed to read chapter 2 from that document, and what I did is I just went ahead and just saved chapter 2 for you, and you can find that where I've been putting the PowerPoint presentations. And I just wanted to pool, because for me as an individual, I work better when information is separated, especially in a long document like that, or if I'm working on a long writing project. But so here you can access just chapter 2, and then you don't have to look at that entire document, and you can see it's 45 pages. You won't need to read everything in here because a lot of it is going to cover things like definitions. Some of it might not be relevant, and it's going to be depending on the type of grant proposal you're working on, but it does give you some really important information and useful information about how to prepare your proposal. And so it's going to take you it's going to take you through things like what does the format of a grant proposal look like, things like, not APA, but what is the NSF looking for? And you may not be, I also don't want this to get confusing because if you're not writing a grant proposal to the NSF, don't worry. This document is meant for people who are applying for grants for the NSF, but this document is provided to you to give you a really specific formatting to follow, so you can use this as a way to create grant proposals for or applying to grant proposals for any organization. So it's not necessarily exclusive to the NSF. So one of the things I found really useful about this chapter is toward the bottom they give these, I have to go all the way down here, but toward the end they have these exhibits, is what they call them. And these are kind of like these checklists, and I think these are really useful to look at, so I would highly recommend you kind of go through these. I would kind of scan effectively through this chapter. Like I said, you won't need to read everything. You just want things that are going to be pertinent to the assignment. You want to be a smart reader. Of course, if you can read it through Word and you have the time, that's great, but then not everything is necessarily relevant. So, but it does give you these good checklists for what you want to do. And again, all of the things in the checklist might not be relevant to your particular project, but for example, right, the proposal must be submitted by 5 p.m. submitter's local time, right? That doesn't apply to you guys because again, you aren't submitting this to the NSF, so you would just ignore that one. But looking at some of the criteria that are specific to your particular grant proposal project, right? Like they give you page limitations, so you want to obviously stick to the kind of criteria that we have in the class. But then it says do you have your references cited, if a thing. So the exhibits are kind of handy in that way. I apologize, it's my mom. Are handy in that way. So that was one of the things I found really beneficial about this. But it is a hefty document to read through. So read through it as working smarter, not harder, and that means scanning through and picking out the parts that are going to be the most useful for you in completing this project. So I have that for you in modules. The other reading is a short reading from The Graduate, which is published by UC Berkeley, and this talks about, it's called The Making of a Successful Proposal, and this is also really beneficial. This is much shorter, which is nice, and it's much more readable, and this is nice because it kind of answers basic questions, right? Okay, choosing a problem. You've already kind of started this in Module 7, stating the problem. You did this in your, you probably did a lot of this work already in your planning sheets. And, how you investigate it, how are you qualified to do the work? Again, not everything's going to be relevant to what you're doing, but it's just giving you kind of ideas about what to include and what to think about when you're writing a grant proposal. And I like this is a heuristic right here, which are questions you ask yourself to do quality control about anything. So in this case, it's quality control about a grant proposal, making sure you're identifying what the problem is, how you plan to contribute towards solving the problem, how will you go about investigating the problem, right? And then it's telling you these are objectives versus this is methodology. And then, so this is a good document. For anyone who hasn't been in the world of grants before, you're lucky. you Grants are really a terrible thing to. They're great if you can get a grant, but and this is specific to academics. So because grants are very common in academia, and they're also very common in like the nonprofit world, because the NSF and the NEH, the National Endowment for Humanities, um, those are government-based. I'm not sure what they are. I don't think they're nonprofits, but they're organizations that, where the government gives out money to projects. So and what grants are essentially is you need or want really more. You need money. You have to demonstrate need and purpose and why it's necessary. But for example, I write grants for myself in the field of literature, which is my area, and I'm usually looking for grants when I need supplemental money and specific funding to help me with research or a project on which I'm working. So, and that usually has to do with libraries in my case, or research libraries that have manuscripts that I need to look at. And so I'll apply to, for example, I often apply at the Huntington Library here in Southern California, and they have many, many, 17th century manuscripts that I need to look at for my research. And what they do is if you get selected, then they give you, X amount of funds, and that funding allows you to either take time off of work or supplement your income if you need to kind of rearrange your schedule, so you can have access and time to put toward this project that they're funding. And then they usually expect a deliverable at the end. So, and you'll notice that like Fulbrights are on here. So those are, high academic high academic awards. But grants are very sought after because it is that additional funding that people can receive, and it's considered, if you're able to secure a grant, it is very good for you, and or your company and or the university, because it looks really good for you, because it's not easy. So especially like if you're applying for a Fulbright scholarship, it's called a scholarship, but it is a grant. There aren't many. They might choose one out of, 3,000 people. And so same with organizations like with the NSF or the NEH. These are people who there's tons of people applying or tons of organizations applying, and the chances of getting a grant are really difficult. So grants are difficult to get, which is why grant writing is a really sought after skill, because if you can write grants, then a company's going to be really, it's going to make you more marketable for a company, and more helpful to that company, because if somebody has never written a grant and you're working at a place that is looking to secure grants and extra funding, and you have the know-how of how to do that, it's going to make you much more employable, and much more marketable in the workforce. So grant writing is a tough thing to do. It's not easy, and that's why we are doing it in this class. So so going back to your assignments for this week, so that was the reading, and go back to Module 8. So what you're doing this week is you've got one reflection memo. You're doing that same team meeting conversations in your own group discussion area. There's a discussion memo, and then you have the early draft of your grant proposal project. So the first assignment is this reflection, which is about the reading, and you're writing a very brief memo, and it's asking you to describe how to determine the best formatting for a particular proposal. And I would do this specific to the proposal that you anticipate your group to write about, or not, well, to write about and to create that kind of that multimedia presentation you're being asked to do for your early draft. So you can make it specific to that. It doesn't have to be, but I think that might be the most useful for you. So reading through those two things, and then kind of reflecting back on how do I determine to format this grant proposal that I'm writing to X organization. And the next assignment you're being asked to do outside of that team meeting, those team meeting discussions you're having, is another reflection. Like I said in one of my previous video lectures, you're doing a lot of reflection in this class, so it can get confusing. But so you're also doing writing another reflection memo, another short memo. It's just slightly longer than the other one, and this is focusing on the audience awareness and the ethical considerations, and specifically the ethical considerations inherent in grant proposal writing, and offer your way of addressing them. So thinking about, you know, and again, you can focus this on your groups. You're individually doing these, but you can focus this on your group's grant proposal project if that makes it easier. But you want to think about, who's your audience? How do you write in a way and format in a way that makes the grant proposal specific to that audience? And then what are some of the ethical considerations inherent in grant proposal writing? And how you rhetorically would address that. And this is one of those, so since this is a discussion, it's, again, as you've done in the past, recommended that you post by the third day, which is Sunday. And this one you'll do the 2 response posts, which are the same length as they have been in the past, 75 to 100 words. And for these responses, you want to offer suggestions for how to address the early draft of your grant proposal project, and then you'll have your final version of the grant proposal due in Module 9 at the end of this course. So for this is a multimedia presentation that you'll be uploading, and one person from your group, just like in Module 7, one person in your group will be uploading this document. So you just need to decide within your group who wants to upload this. But what it's asking you to do is, I can never get the highlighting exactly how I want it. So submitting an early draft, so using the multimedia presentation software of your group's choosing. So you guys, within each group you want to decide what platform you want to use, and it gives you recommendations, Apple Keynote, PowerPoint, Google Slides, or Prezi. You want to build a presentation that summarizes the most critical information of your proposal in no fewer than 10 slides. So you need at least 10 slides, and your team should aim to build a presentation that would take no more than 10 minutes to deliver. And of course, it should follow best practices outlined in the readings. So you may have heard this before, but what people typically say is that a slide is a minute. So if you have 10 slides, that's typically 10 minutes, or you should at least allot for that. But it just depends on the purpose of each slide, the rhetorical purpose of each slide. So you might end up having 11 slides or 12 slides. It just depends on how long you would anticipate talking about, because you're not talking about it, but how long you anticipate your a viewer of that particular slide would need to absorb the information that's on that slide. So, and then you want to pay close attention to the submission instructions for this. So And it's because it says you may choose to provide recorded audio or video elements. It's not required, but you can if you want. And then here's, select one member of the team to submit, and it tells you how to save it. You want to save it as the PowerPoint file, the PPTX, and then it gives you the naming prescriptions for that. So that's our first kind of really multimedia project. So I just wanted to let everyone be aware of that. This is an early draft, so I will be providing feedback on each of the groups' early drafts of the grant proposal project, and then you can take that feedback, and then hopefully that will be helpful as your group kind of finalizes the grant proposal project for Module 9. So I just wanted to make this brief presentation just to kind of go over grants, what's happening this week, and then show you where I uploaded that Chapter 2 reading, which will hopefully be helpful so you're not stuck in that giant document. But if you have any questions, feel free to contact me. Otherwise, I look forward to continuing to look at your grant proposal projects, and I will talk to you guys soon. Okay, bye-bye.